podcast is a quest for well-being, a quest for a meaningful life through the exploration of fundamental truth. Enlightening ideas, insights on physical, mental, and spiritual health. The inspiration is love. The aspiration is to awaken new ways of thinking that can lead us to a new way of being well. Some of the topics are addiction, fear, faith, self-compassion, relationships, codependency, emotional intelligence, and more. Welcome to Body, Mind, and Soul Healing Conversations.
It is natural and fundamental for living beings to want to be happy, healthy, and free from suffering. Life would not have persisted for nearly 4 billion years were living things not motivated to and reasonably good at seeking favorable circumstances and avoiding unfavorable ones. It seems human aspirations are doomed to be awkwardly incompatible with the vicissitudes of life. Indeed, in most, if not all of us, there is an undercurrent of dis-ease, a fear about what is to come, that the moment of something terrible happening might be in our future, and not just someone else's who we read about in the news. So what to do if we can detach from that belief that our wishes are more important than reality? We can begin to find real peace. Josh Sandeman. This episode is about conscious awareness, transformation, freedom, and thoughts in between. And we'll be listening to Josh Sandeman, who is a family nurse practitioner working in an underserved population in Oregon. He graduated from the University of Pennsylvania in 1990 with a degree in American Civilization and Psychology. He then worked as a programmer analyst and research assistant in Penn's Addiction Treatment Research Center for 5 years, before enrolling in a doctoral program in theoretical neuroscience. For 10 years, Josh also worked in Silicon Valley as a software engineer before switching to medicine, a childhood interest of mine. He is married with 2 young sons and an avid long-distance runner, and does science as a hobby. Here is the interview with Josh Sandeman.
Welcome back, Josh. My first question is, who is Josh Sandeman today? Have you learned anything about yourself in life since the last time we spoke?
That's an interesting question. I think I've certainly made maybe a little bit of progress. It wasn't that long ago that we spoke, but I think, every single day I make an effort to, be a little bit more relaxed about life and its challenges and its ups and downs, and how best to meet them. And I feel like, every day I make a little bit of progress, or a little, something new. I don't always have the best days, but I think overall, I just continue down the path that I put myself on more than 20 years ago.
What is that path?
Well, I think it's I practice in the tradition of Soto Zen. I have lay ordination in that tradition. I don't I don't do it formally anymore. I live someplace where there isn't even a Buddhist, Soto Zen Buddhist center. But I practice on my own, and I have some contact with old friends who are doing the same. And it's a life that's committed to paying attention to your life moment by moment, and with the hope that the awareness and the attention will help you make better choices and learn and grow as a person and have a more positive, constructive effect on others.
That sounds really good. Thank you for answering that question.
Sure.
My official first question based on the subject will be, what is to be free from suffering?
Yeah, so that's an interesting question. I would say freedom from suffering is not the absence of suffering. It's developing a certain amount of comfort with your capacity to bear it, to understand it, and to put it to the best use possible, given that it is an intrinsic part of life.
So it's the understanding of fundamental suffering.
Mhm. Yeah, so I think a couple of things happen that when you've practiced for a long time with sort of the meditative life is one is you do suffer less in a certain sense because you more and more you let go of various sorts of struggles with life that are basically rooted in wanting life to be other than how it is. When you boil it all down. But at the same time, it's not that, the goal of, sort of the Buddhist or the meditative life is not to just basically feel nothing and be indifferent. I think that would be very concerning. So if a loved one gets sick or dies, you feel grief, and that's an appropriate response, even though it's a painful one. But there's a deeper level at which you're not shocked by your grief or set off balance by it or wishing it would just go away. There's more of just like this acceptance that these sorts of losses and setbacks are simply a part of life, and your response to them is simply a part of life. And the question is, can you just sit with that with awareness and openness and be willing to be with it as it is? And that sort of lack of struggle with pain changes you in ways that are not always easily articulable, but are pretty profound once you experience it.
Yeah, it makes so much sense to me. You mentioned a meditative life. So, what is to meditate?
Well, in the Buddhist tradition, there are there's a number of different Buddhist traditions, and there are a number of different kinds of meditation. Zen is often characterized as having the one method, rather than there being multiple different kinds of meditations and visualization meditations and meditations on compassion and, various sorts, which are, people find very helpful. Zen is focused on sort of what a lot of people believe was sort of the Buddha's original style of meditation, which is simply resting in your pure awareness of what's happening. So you may get distracted, caught up, lost in thought, lost in feeling or whatever, but the practice is always to settle back into the awareness of that experience, whatever is happening. And you just keep doing that over and over again, not just when you're doing formal sitting meditation, but throughout the day. It's sort of it's a way of life where attention and presence is foundational to what everything else that comes from that.
Wow. Pure awareness. What would be pure awareness in this very moment, having this conversation with you?
Mhm. Well, I mean, the awareness is just this capacity our minds naturally have every moment of the day of knowing what's happening. I mean, the it's not just that you have a sensation in your body or a thought or an emotion. There's this awareness of what's happening, and I think we all have it, but with meditation, you can cultivate it far more than you might have ever imagined. So that awareness is deeper and you know stronger and more persistent in your day to day life. Because a lot of us, if we have an untrained mind, we're sort of aware, but actually, we're often distracted, lost in thought, you know, doing errands. We're more caught. The awareness is sort of there, but we're much more caught up in the contents of our experience than the actual awareness of those contents.
So I'm wondering how different being aware is from being concentrated or paying attention.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think attention and concentration have to do with sort of how narrowly focused your awareness is. So you can, if you're really concentrated on a particular task, like doing your math homework or washing the dishes, you may not be as aware of other things that are going on. So, awareness has this sort of capacity to sort of expand and contract, which can be perfectly appropriate. There's plenty of things where you need to be very focused and filtering out other things. And then there's other times, like with sitting meditation, where you just broaden that awareness to as much of your experience as possible. And I think both are useful depending on the context.
Mm. Wow. So it is awareness. It's sort of being here, but with our entire being, if it's possible, right? Sensory perceptions,
Yeah.
but also intuition. Let me go back for a moment about suffering, because I had a question for you about acceptance of what it is, of reality as it is.
Yeah.
How can we accept reality as it is when we are in pain, like physical pain?
Mhm. Right. So I think there's a couple of levels to it. One is, you accept your non acceptance, if that makes any sense. So if in this moment you are not okay with what is happening, then that is just another thing to be aware of and to accept. So it's inclusive at the broadest level. So if you're angry and rejecting what has happened to you or what is going on, then that's the truth. That is the truth of this moment. That is what you're feeling in addition to anything else that's going on. Because I think the Buddha's point is in every moment the world is as it is. And we may not like it, and that's part of how it is the fact that we don't like it. So the power of awareness is that awareness doesn't accept or reject. Awareness is never angry or sad. Awareness is never confused. It's just aware.
Mm,
And the more we settle into that simple consciousness of what's going on, the more the alchemy of our soul starts to take hold. And it's not a logical or rational thing. It's not a philosophical argument. It's just what happens. Sort of analogous to if you just go out every day and start running and run every day and run more and more, your body will just simply get more fit. You know, that's just how it is. So,
mm. So that also means then when we are in states of mind of happiness and enjoyment and positive under the effect of positive emotions and maybe due to expectations or I don't know, feel good experiences, that means we are
Mhm.
not aware?
No, I mean, you can be perfectly aware of your happiness and your joy, you know. Um, those are just more emotions that are just part of being human. So it's, it doesn't matter what the valence of the emotion is, whether it's positive or negative. All of it's simply a part of life and part of being human. And you can be aware of all of it. You can be lost in it too. You can be totally caught up in your joy and your pleasure, and not really paying attention to its nature, because it will change. That's the thing, is you're very happy right now, but all of these things that arise, as the Buddha said, everything that arises will cease. Anything that's conditioned so that it arises based on certain conditions are constantly fluxing and flowing. The world is constantly in motion. It's constantly changing. And if you try to hold on to, something because you like it, you're going to be disappointed because it's not going to last.
Right. Or we'll become slaves, right, of such a
Yeah,
thing. Trying to repeat over and over and over that experience and
yeah.
that
And that,
slavery.
yeah, and that was one of the Buddha's, I think, most fundamental insights, is that, you know, we're not really, we're kind of ignorant to these fundamental truths about the world, that we have very little control over what's going to happen, and the world is in flux and changing. And so if you invest your whole well-being based on having everything the way you want it, um, you're going to be disappointed. And people may say, well, of course, that's obvious, but that's not actually how we live. We constantly live like we're trying to get to a permanent state of smooth sailing. Even if confronted with it, we may admit, well, that's silly. I think there's still a deeply seated hope or expectation that if we be good and work hard and say our prayers and eat our Wheaties and whatever, it'll all work out in the end. And that's just not how the world works. And so we're setting ourselves up for this constant unease, because we know the other shoe is going to drop, but we don't really want it to, and we keep hoping that it's not going to, and then it does, and then we're upset again, and around it goes. And the Buddha called that the samsara, the wheel of suffering. We're just kind of going around in circles, not realizing that it's how our mind is working and our expectations and our whatnot that are actually the problem, and not how the world works per se.
True. So the pursuit of happiness is an illusion then?
Well, if happiness means having your circumstances always the way you want them and never the way you don't want them, then yes, absolutely.
So my next question, what is happiness to you?
uh, I don't know. I, I, for me, I almost hesitate to use the word happiness. And in fact, in my own life, I don't really think much about happiness. And I think what the Zen practice has taught me, not in an intellectual way, but in an experiential way, is that life isn't really about any particular state of mind, whether it's happiness or sorrow. It's this willingness to meet life as it is, and that brings something that's closer to what I would call, peace or satisfaction, which I think is more primordial and fundamental than some of these more obvious emotional states like happiness or joy.
Right. I agree. What about the pursuit of health? What is to be healthy?
Well, I mean, I think very holistically, and I think, you know, the Buddha talked very holistically. His noble eightfold path and a lot of his other, teachings were, yeah, you take care of your mind and your body, and you take care of others, and you take care of your world, you take care of everything as best you can. And so, part of that is eating healthy food. part of that is exercising, because our bodies have the nature of needing to move.
Mm.
Uh, and, you know, taking time out to rest, make sure you get enough rest, make sure, your bodily needs and your mind needs are met. But the idea is to do it mindfully, so that you're not just making decisions ad hoc or willy nilly or on impulse or because of the latest article you read on the internet, or it's a more considered, conscious, deliberative way of addressing the needs of your body and your mind and of others.
Right. So happiness and health, they're part of the journey of life, then they're not a destination or things to be pursued, right, Josh?
Yeah, I think it's moment by moment. If you it one way to put it is, if you take care of each moment, the overall arc of your life will take care of itself.
Mhm. Yeah, taking care of this moment. And that might
Yes.
include taking care of yourself in various ways, right? And
Yep.
others, right?
Yeah.
What is the message behind the quote you wrote in one of your blog posts? The quote says, "People make plans and God laughs." I'm just wondering what you meant by this.
I think it's kind of getting to what we were talking about earlier, is the idea is that, we actually have so little control over, the direction the world takes. And if you're somebody who's theistic, and believes in God, the way of expressing that is kind of, whatever God is up to is quite a bit beyond our comprehension. And so we make these plans based on a very limited human fallible view of the world, when something much bigger is going on, and it doesn't necessarily have our individual plans in mind when it unfolds.
So true. Why do you think so many people believe in a personal God?
Hmm. Well, I don't know. I mean, I never really, I have sort of a complicated feelings on the subject of God, because I feel like I'm kind of agnostic. I don't feel like I really know, and I don't really feel like I don't know. Um, but I think, some people who believe in God believe that we have that instinct because there is a God, and God, that's one of God's ways of trying to bring people's attention to connecting with Him. We have this need because God put it there as a way of leading us to Him, and prompting us to think about Him and try to connect with Him. Um, if you're more scientific and agnostic or atheistic, you may attribute it to our evolutionary heritage as being social creatures who have this instinctive need as social creatures to be part of something larger than themselves, and connected to something larger than themselves, have deeper meaning. Because we're very conscious and rational creatures, we want to think there's a purpose to things, and it's not just all willy nilly and random and meaningless. Because meaning is so important to us. And I think that has to do with being social and conscious creatures. Um, so, I mean, I think all of these explanations may have merit. And they may both be true. I don't. I don't. I mean, obviously, I'm just one dude.
But with a lot of good, I would say, good guests about life, the truth about life. That's great. How do we balance our need for safety and security with life's unpredictable nature?
Well, yeah, I don't know. I don't know how much of a balance it actually is, but I think if you live mindfully, you can, I think have better judgment about how you can take care of yourself and your loved ones and not expose yourself and other people to unnecessary risks. In other words, not being foolish and reckless. you
That's
know,
a
you,
good
you can,
start, right?
Yeah, yes, because but you can be a very safe driver, and somebody coming the other way is very absorbed in their texting and swerve across traffic and hit you head on. I mean, you can you can make good decisions, but you don't have control over the decisions other people make, and you don't have control over which direction that hurricane or tornado is headed. So you do your best, but but again, you have to remember that the world is much bigger and has just awesome power that we have no power over.
Right. And one of the things about the Stoic philosophy, it's the
Yeah,
practices on reflecting about bad things happening to us. And that's one of the techniques, right, used by Stoics.
yeah. Buddhists do something very similar. Um, and in fact, in the ancient, I think it's still practiced today, but sometimes monks, they go meditate in the charnel grounds, where bodies are burned, as a way of, facing death and mortality head on. That this is going to happen to you someday. We're all going to die. And so, yeah, there's a lot of Buddhist meditations that confront very directly, illness, and as the Buddha said in his, the parable of his life, whether or not these things literally happened or not, his inspiration to seek a resolution to human suffering and whatnot was that he saw an old person, then he saw a sick person, then he saw a dead person. And, those old age, sickness, and death are like the three, examples used of the fact that bad, difficult things are going to happen to us, and none of us are getting out of this life alive. I think Stoicism and Buddhism, I'm not much of an expert on Stoic philosophy, but I think there's a considerable amount of overlap, and I think that just happens to be one of the ways in which they do overlap.
You talk about relaxing deeply into our own pure conscious awareness among all of our attachments to desires, sensations, thoughts, and feelings. My
Yeah.
question is, are some practices such as being grateful for something or appreciative of what we already have one of the paths to inner peace?
Yeah, I think that's a very widespread practice, is like, gratitude practice. Acknowledging everything from just the gift and mystery of being alive to very specific things. And, I think people find that, to be a very powerful and worthwhile practice, because it does help balance out the fact that we also tend to be very anxious creatures who have a tendency to focus on everything that's wrong and painful. So it can be, kind of a good balancing of that tendency.
Are there other practices you engage in yourself or you recommend for inner peace?
Um, well, I mean, my cornerstone is the mindfulness meditation, but I also, I have a little journal, and when I get up early in the morning and getting started with my day, I write down three things that I'm grateful for and three things that I'm excited about. And that kind of helps orient my mind in that direction. And it's just, a simple, relatively quick thing, but it allows me to kind of touch base with gratitude.
Yeah, I like that, Josh. Writing three things, the number three, too. So you also wrote, if we can detach from that belief that our wishes are more important than reality, we can begin to find real peace. I love this. So my question is, what would be a good example of the difference between beliefs and reality?
Well, beliefs are just thoughts arising in our mind, and reality is how the world actually is. Um, and like I alluded to earlier, I mean, I think that's, when the Buddha talked about the Four Noble Truths, I mean, he's saying that's sort of like the fundamental issue, is the disconnect between how we believe or want the world to be and how it actually is. And the way to dismantle that disconnect is through, pure awareness and observation of how the world is and how your mind is and how everything actually is in the moment, as opposed to getting very lost in your beliefs and your thoughts and your ratiocinations about, life. You kind of take a step back from that and just focus on, well, how is it now? What's true right now? And yeah.
So I'm wondering how we can interact with reality without a belief. How is it possible?
I, I don't think it's totally possible. I think that I think it's more that the more aware you are, the more you are aware when you an assumption or expectation or a belief is at work in this moment.
Mm,
You know,
right.
the expectation that today wasn't going to be a busy day and it turned out to be a very busy day, and how irritated you're getting over the course of the day because your expectation was thwarted. But the reality is it is a busy day and your expectation was simply wrong.
Right. So I'm just wondering what's real, really, and what's not a delusion.
Well, that's the $1 million question, isn't it? I think I would, I don't know that anybody knows the answer to that. I mean, I think philosophers, still haven't solved the conundrum of what's real and true and what isn't. I think because we just can't step outside of ourselves and get perspective. We're subjective beings who have limited minds and limited capacities, and
Mm.
but I think one thing I would say is stepping out of spiritual realm and into the scientific realm. You know, Evolution selects creatures that get enough right about how the world is that they can actually survive. And nature is pretty unforgiving. So if a creature is not in touch enough with what's real as to where the food actually is as opposed to where it isn't, and where the tiger actually is as opposed to where it isn't, they simply wouldn't survive. So I don't think our knowledge about the world is a crapshoot. And I think the ultimate example of that is the immense power the scientific enterprise has shown for being able to predict and explain and manipulate the world. I mean, the devices you and I are using right now to communicate depend on an exquisitely powerful theoretical framework called quantum physics. And if it weren't super accurate about certain things, these devices wouldn't even be possible. So on the other hand, we can clearly believe, human beings can clearly believe things that, to other human beings just seem crazy. So I think it's not either we're deluded or we're not. I think there are some things that seem a lot more certain and verifiable than others. And again, if a belief doesn't actually impair your ability to survive, there's no harm, no foul, as nature would say. So I think it's just a complicated mess.
It is very much, Josh. Oh my God, yeah, it is. Because the way I see it is that if we were not deluded enough to survive, we wouldn't be in the body, right, in the first place. What are some basic truths about life we all should be aware of from your experience?
Wow. Well, I think probably number one on the list is it's a profound mystery just to be here at all. And it's not a mystery that we understand or may ever fully understand. And the other thing is that beautiful gift and mystery is very short. we're here. We're here for maybe 7 or 8 decades if we're lucky, and then we're gone. And as far as we know, we never come back, and that might very well be it. So it's as the Buddha said, things are beautiful because they are doomed. The preciousness in part comes from the fact that nothing is going to last forever. Because in some sense, if it lasted forever, it would be so easy to just take it for granted. But the fact that that sunset lasts for just a moment, whatever it is, I mean, it's all fleeting. And there's a inscription on this these little wooden plaques that are hit with a hammer to call people to meditation, in the Zen tradition. And the quote is, life is fleeting, gone, gone, awake, awake, do not waste this life. And that has stuck with me from the very first time I read it, because that's sort of the essence of it. We're precious and we're brief, and a lifetimes of reflection on that, I think, can lead to a very worthy life.
Yeah, I like that. My last question to you about the topic of inner peace and acceptance of reality is, what is to be free enough to do things in life with greater presence?
Well, practice makes better, if not perfect, right? So I think, I mean, that's one of the reasons why, after 23 years, I still do formal sitting meditation, because I think that I know from long experience that if I drift away from that for a time, it makes a very big difference in terms of how present I am for the rest of the day. And it's like anything else that needs to be cultivated, whether it's physical fitness or anything else. I mean, you got to keep doing it, because it's if you stop, the effects are just simply not going to persist. So,
And it is very powerful, yeah, the practice of meditation.
yeah. So you just have to be persistent, but underlying that is that you have to be sincerely motivated, because if your heart's not in it, it really isn't going to have anywhere near the effect, I think, as if you're not sincere about the practice.
Putting the heart into it, it's very important. What is it? What's to put the heart into meditation?
Well, I think scientists have come to the conclusion that motivation is very important, and there's no formula for creating it. It's a little bit of a mystery, and so I think it's kind of it's a little bit of a circle. I think actually having enough motivation to at least do something, and then start to realize the benefits of it, can then feed back and increase the motivation. So, it's not like I'm saying that if you're not super motivated, forget about it. It doesn't have to be perfect. But I think if you're motivated enough just to go out and run or bike or walk every day, you'll start to feel better, and therefore you'll be more motivated to do it. And I think, the same has been true for me with meditation. Is, I do drift away from it for a week or two, and then I really start to notice the difference, and I'm like, oh yeah, yep, I really want to go back to this. It's that important to me.
For how long do you meditate?
It very, especially since I had kids, it's been it's been a little
Shorter
harder.
meditations, right?
Yeah, but I usually try to do, I get up early in the morning and do it, and I usually do it for like half an hour.
Do you recommend that everyone meditate for 30 minutes or less could also be effective?
Yeah, I think the general consensus is even if the most you can do is 2 or 5 minutes, that's still way better than nothing. I think everybody has to make an individual choice for themselves as to what they can tackle. And I think not having an all or nothing attitude is really important, because if you feel like, well, if I can't meditate a half an hour a day, I might as well just forget it. Um, uh, I don't think that's as productive as saying, well, let me just start with 2 minutes. And if that seems approachable to you and you're motivated to do it, then just start there and then see what happens.
I like that. Do what we can, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yep.
start where we are at. Do you teach your children how to meditate?
Yep, I do. Not all the time, because you kind of got to go with the ebb and flow of children. And if they're not receptive, meditation's not the kind of thing that I want them to view as being another chore to do.
Right, true. Yes.
So when I see opportunities, I seize them. But they're still young enough at 8 and 9 that I just try to be responsive to where they are and what they're receptive to.
Okay. So, in a way, you're saying that meditation is really hard to teach children.
It can be. I mean, it depends on the kids. Some kids take to it more than others, because we're all just very individual. But the other thing I've done is there's this whole series of books, I think they're called the Buddha's Apprentice or whatever, and they're children's stories that are based on Buddhist teachings, and they're very cute, and the kids just love it. I was kind of surprised at how much they like it. And I've read, there's 3 or 4 books in the series, and I've read them more than once to the kids because they really enjoy it. And so that's something that they're more responsive to. So I've gone with that a little bit more than with the formal meditation.
Right. I like that. What's the name of the series again, Josh?
I think it's Buddha's Apprentice.
I'll look into it and possibly link to your interview so parents they can use that as a method.
Yeah, I can email you the name too and the name of the author.
Oh, great. Yeah, that would be excellent. Thank you.
Yeah.
So my last questions to you outside of the the subject that we have been talking. How do we become our best friend?
Ah, I would say that's another way of. I think the answer to that is another way of saying that sort of willingness to be with ourselves as we are, I think is being the best possible friend to yourself that you can be. Whether you're angry or confused or tired or whatever, it's just that willingness to simply be with yourself as you are in that moment is a great way to be your own friend.
Describe life in one word.
Mysterious.
What never fails to make you smile?
uh, my kids.
I thought so. What was the hardest lesson to learn about yourself, others, and life?
Um, that it really isn't. The world is often not the way I want it to be, and that it's been a long journey to, um, let go of those demands and expectations of life.
What is your definition of success?
Living consciously.
If today was the end of your adventure on Earth, what would you regret to have done or said?
Um, I do sort of wish that I wasn't such a slow Zen student.
Right. Good.
that wisdom doesn't take so long to cultivate.
Right. It does, right? It takes a long
Yeah.
time. Right. What is to be strong?
Being willing to meet life as it is. Sorry if I sound like a broken record, but yeah, I think it takes tremendous courage to drop the defense mechanisms and the running and the mental gymnastics and just stop and face life as it is.
What is to be true to yourself?
Well, again, I would say it's being completely aware to what's really going on with you, what you're really doing, thinking, what you're really up to. Yeah,
If it is possible to know, right, what we're up to.
yeah,
Boy.
yeah.
Do you believe in some kind of life after death?
I honestly have no idea. Yeah, I don't have a strong emotional need to believe that it's one way or the other. But I really, I feel like I have no idea.
Right. Interesting. And you don't have any desires to know that life continues, that your consciousness continues on after death? Is this a wish?
It never really has been. I've never actually really cared that much whether life goes on or not, which sounds kind of bizarre to say, but I think that's really true. I think one of the things that made me simpatico with Zen in the first place is that I think on a primal level, none of us really wants to die, but for some reason, I'm just very focused on this life.
That's actually very interesting. That you're never afraid, really, or you're never wished to live on. It's very interesting. If you knew you would die soon, what would you change about your life or yourself?
Honestly, not much. I think I'm pretty much doing exactly what I feel I need to be doing. So it wouldn't matter whether it was tomorrow or 40 years from now.
Wow. Great. Really great. Thank you so much, Josh, for your wisdom.
You're very welcome.
Yeah, thank you. Where can we find more information about you, what you do, projects?
Well, yeah, I think that my main online presence is my LinkedIn site. And I do have a blog on Medium.
Do you have the link? LinkedIn, what is the ID name?
I think it's just linkedin.com / Joshua Sandeman.
And the Medium blog, do you have the link? Can you?
Well, you can search it on Medium. The title of the blog is Whirlpools in the Stream.
Great. Thank you so much again for your presence.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye for now, Josh.
Bye.
Thank you for listening. To learn more about Josh Sandeman, please visit his LinkedIn page, linkedin.com/in/Joshua-Sandeman.
To learn more about this podcast, please visit fitforjoy.org/podcast. I want to thank the Patreon members, Lawrence McGrath, Mark Basden, Terry Clayton, and Aidan Vickrock. Thank you again for listening, and bye for now.